Hey, welcome back. It's your old pal Steve Areno, Steve Areno Cool Kits. We're looking at the Durango Press HOn3 Rotary Snowplow, Part 2, Take 1. Boom. All right. So, as I mentioned, Part 1, I modeled the Rio Grande Southern, and this particular kit is of the Durango Rio Grande Western snowplow. And I had mentioned that there were a few differences, and that's just because I was going by memory. Like I said, that I had never really looked at that close, but I said, oh, there's some differences up in here on the tender. Well, it turns out there's a lot of difference. As I was looking through some references and starting to dig down into what those differences were, all along the line, it started jumping out that, yeah, that's different, that's different, that's different, and by the time you're done listing all the differences, it's like Santa's Christmas list, all the things that are different. But it's not only this treatment of how they covered up the coal and the coal tender, but it's just all the way through. And then, I got to thinking, as I was looking at those references, and I'll show a couple of those up here. Hold on just a second. Okay, so we've all got our materials that we look at, and I've got a lot of them, just have picked them up. There was like a third-hand bookstore down the street from me where I lived one time, and it was a big third-hand bookstore. And you could go in there, and not to be gruesome, but I think a lot of people, who were more senior guys, they would pass on, and then somehow their estate collection would end up in the bookstore. And you could get books like this one, like for $5. And it was incredible. And they also had a book exchange buyback program. So I would take books in and get in-store credit. And so then I would get this for net nothing, right? So one time I went in there, and, we've all been around, and we know that Mallory Hope Farrell, he was a Western Airlines pilot, and he lived in Colorado, I think it was, and he used to travel and take his layover days, and he would visit all these railroads. First got to know him through the West Side Lumber Company Railroad, which was his personal favorite, but he also into the Rio Grande Southern, the Silver San Juan, and he did this outstanding book. I was looking through here, and where is it? I got it marked here. You find a bunch of images, Rio Grande Southern rotary snowplow, and so some of the things that we're all detail-oriented as modelers, so started noticing that this different than the one that was done for the Durango and Rio Grande Western snowplow, but it's specifically different for the Rio Grande Southern. Right? It doesn't have these connected pieces up here. It's also quarter circle, and it has straight pieces here, and it's not connected here. These are independent pieces here, and there's also only one holding strap down here, not the two additional ones over here. And then another big difference is you're going to notice it's sort of shed construction versus external braced, like is shown here, and also the number of doors and windows. And the number of doors and windows, the doors are the same, but the number of windows is different, and the placement of the doors is slightly different, as well as the treatment of the roof, and the way that they handled the, I guess you call them wind wings for the stoker back here from the coal tender. So that is all very, very different. So you end up with a door here, two windows here, a door here that's further back, and two windows back here. And like I say, no external bracing. It's all just vertical siding. These is actually continuous to it. They go back at an angle. So you'll have to look at some other pictures. And also the type of headlamp that was used. Where did I see that? Sometimes you'll find images with a headlamp and sometimes without, but even when you find it with the headlamp, it's that old style oil headlamp like this. Okay, and here's a good picture of how the roof was different. It was angled at the side and slightly bowed on top, had a center smokestack right here for the steam generator for turning the blade. And it had four windows up front, a triangular, a rectangular, and obviously a rectangular and a triangular. And they were very small, and the bottom sill of this window was set almost at roof line over here. So when you add up all those differences, it's pretty different. Now, luckily, and here I maybe I'll just build it exactly like this, but I'll just paint it the Lightbox car red. And me being me, I go, no, that's not going to work. I'm not going to be happy with that. Every time I look at it, I'm going to go, well, that's just a story of a Rio Grande Western that somebody painted Lightbox car red rather than painting it properly or doing it properly, modeling it properly and painting it properly. And I go, that's not going to work for me. So I mentioned earlier in some of my videos that once upon a time I had been a structural designer on my way to becoming a structural engineer and a architect before becoming electrical engineer. So those architectural skills, layout, interpretation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, hey, they all come to the rescue and I can actually go to work. And so what I did is I went through all my photographs and knowing what I know about lumber and building methods, etc. I went to work and just started forming this thing into what it needs to be in order to be proper. So here's a mock-up, and this is sort of like my pattern, which I will now cut the wood pieces that are supplied in the kit, and we will cannibalize and use what's in this kit to accomplish the Rio Grande Southern snowplow. So I've already modified the blade housing up here. Like I said, I cut this loose, went through and there's a way, and modelers will know how to do that, to soften the plastic and bend the plastic around something that's cylindrical to get the quarter on the radius. These pieces were straight, so it's a matter of just reattaching those at the proper angle, and cut these out of white plastic of the right thickness and set them at the right angle. So we got this done, and that was sort of key because it helped me from photographs establish where the bottom sill of this window is. And then with the spring point of the side, I could then calculate down and lay out the small door, window. It's now moved back. Okay, you've got the door, the floor, and then the two windows here. And I've studied photographs over time, there was modification. Originally, these two windows back here were smaller, but in its later life, before it blew up, I think it was in 1949 when they let the water get too low and the whole side blew off. You'll see pictures of that. But just maybe 10 or so years before that, they had modified these two back windows to be square as well. Since the, using Kevin Lynch's, the MIT urban planning professor, What Time Is This Place? Theory of modeling. Mine is set to 1938, right? That's the year I model, is 1938, which means I can't have anything in my modeling collection, modeling layout, nothing that's newer than 1938. It can be older, just can't be newer. So, that's sort of the Okie, Arky, Missouri, Dust Bowl, making their way to California, which some of my family, were caught up in that Depression era stuff. So family folklore, et cetera, comes through. But anyway, here we are, and we've got this mocked up, and, it's just the whole FDR era. I mean, they just go on and on and on about the history, because this is also about history, right? Modeling. And here's the siding, wing windows, and there's I found a little, for some reason they ran the siding down below, and of course this brown part in here, this represents the underframe, which I will use all the parts in the kit for that. Gonna have to get some Grant Line windows for here and here, and I'll have to see if I can come up with something for this and this. If not, I'll just be doing some scratch building. So overall, pretty happy with where I've got that roof figured out. I think we will be able to make this happen. All right, we'll talk to you later, guys. Bye. Okay, real quick update here. I went for my day before New Year's or New Year's Eve jog. While I was out there sort of thinking and getting my mind off of something specific, I kind of wandered back, and when I got to double checking, in fact, when I got home, I did get it wrong earlier. So the way this roof works is you have these solid sections all the way back to this point right here, and then just slightly overlapping it, at least on the Rio Grande Southern, they had this kind of interesting extension back here that was kind of duckbill shaped like this. Had a radius out here on this edge. It had the sort of chamfered portions here and here, and then the slightly bowed, just barely enough to be more than flat. And it looks like from pictures I studied, this was a tar paper roof. And from this point here to that point there was 10 even sections. And then here it was slightly overlapped and connected, which I'm on my SketchUp model here showing with this blue tape. So in the final, and then using proportionality, 1, 2, and a half was about the length of this extension. So 1, 2, and a half of this dimension. So you get this divided by 10, then get 2 and a half, and that's what this is, and a radius and a bend, and blah blah blah. You can get it. So my pattern this is what I'll use when I go to final materials and start building up the model. Yeah, so here's where we are, and I'm having a blast. I'm having fun getting this thing dialed in. And no disrespect to Durango Press, if they'd had the Rio Grande Southern version in HOn3, I would have bought that kit. But since you can only get the Durango Rio Grande Western, and you have to take it from there. So that's what we're doing. All right, bye.